The African tragedy, exploitation, shifting alliances, and France's looming decline. In the realm of international politics, the story of Africa is one of a continent long exploited by Western powers. Africa, a vast and resource-rich land, was transformed into a veritable shopping mall for the colonial powers, where they picked and took whatever they desired, rarely offering fair compensation. This essay, inspired by the principles of Machiavelli, delves into the history of Africa's exploitation, the role of organizations like the IMF, World Bank, and UN, the changing dynamics of global influence, and the consequences that France faces due to its short-sighted policies. Africa as the Western powers' shopping mall. Africa's tragic history of colonialism reveals a tale of plunder, oppression, and the insatiable hunger for wealth. European powers, driven by imperial ambitions, carved up the African continent among themselves during the infamous Scramble for Africa in the late 19th century. They exploited Africa's resources, extracted its riches, and left behind a legacy of poverty, division, and exploitation. This relentless exploitation mirrored the oppressive systems of slavery, as Africans were subjugated to serve foreign interests. The role of international organizations. As the colonial era waned, the Western powers, unwilling to relinquish their grip on Africa, devised new mechanisms of control. International organizations like the International Monetary Fund, IMF, World Bank, and United Nations, UN, became instruments of neocolonialism. They imposed structural adjustments, saddled African nations with debilitating debt, and maintained a cycle of dependency, ensuring that Africa remained vulnerable and beholden to Western interests. These organizations, ostensibly created to promote global stability and development, were, in reality, used to perpetuate Western dominance. Shifting alliances and emerging powers. The 21st century witnessed a seismic shift in global politics. Rising powers like China, Russia, and Turkey recognized Africa's potential and seized the opportunity to forge mutually beneficial partnerships. China, in particular, embarked on a massive investment spree across the African continent, funding infrastructure projects, providing economic aid, and securing access to valuable resources. Russia and Turkey, too, developed strategic alliances with African nations, diversifying their influence and economic interests. France's missteps and consequences. France, once a dominant colonial power in Africa, found itself losing ground. President Emmanuel Macron's approach towards Africa, characterized by arrogance and a lack of foresight, contributed to this decline. His failure to engage with African nations on equal terms alienated African leaders and fueled disillusionment across the continent. As China, Russia, and Turkey cultivated stronger ties, France clung to outdated colonial-era policies, resulting in stagnation and missed opportunities. The consequences for France are dire. With Africa's burgeoning population and economic potential, the failure to adapt to changing dynamics will lead to economic decline. As the new colonizers thrive in Africa's fertile grounds, France's short-sighted vision will prove detrimental to its prosperity. Within a decade, it is not inconceivable that France may become the poorest nation within the European Union, a shadow of its former self. In conclusion, Africa's history of exploitation by Western powers is a somber chapter in the annals of human history. The exploitation, once overt, has morphed into a subtler form, perpetuated through international organizations. Meanwhile, emerging powers like China, Russia, and Turkey have embraced Africa as a partner, fostering development and prosperity. France's failure to adapt and its persistent arrogance foretell a bleak future. The shifting sands of global power dynamics serve as a reminder that in the world of geopolitics, those who do not evolve are destined to be left behind, as history unforgivingly records their decline.